All right, so we are continuing in Romans chapter 2, and we are going to pick up in verse 17. I'll be reading verses 17 through 29, so we'll make it to the end of the chapter, and then we'll go through and discuss it a little bit. And tonight I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible translation. And it says, "But if you call yourself a Jew and rely upon the law and boast in God and know his will and distinguish the things that matter, being instructed from the law, and are confident that you yourself are a guide to people who are blind, a light to those in darkness, a corrector of the foolish, a teacher of the immature, possessing in the law the embodiment of knowledge and of the truth, you, therefore, who teach someone else, do you not teach yourself? You who preach that one is not to steal, do you steal? You who say that one is not to commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who loathe idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, through your breaking the law, do you dishonor God? For the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, just as it is written. For indeed, circumcision is of value if you practice the law, but if you are a violator of the law, your circumcision is turned into uncircumcision. So if the uncircumcised man keeps the requirements of the law, will his uncircumcision not be regarded as circumcision? And he who is physically uncircumcised, if he keeps the law, will he not judge you who, though having the letter of the law and circumcision, are a violator of the law? For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly. And circumcision is of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. And his praise is not from people, but from God." Okay, so Paul is finished with the topic of judgment, but not with pointing to the Jewish need for a greater righteousness than the heritage of the law. In fact, starting here in verse 17, he actually increases the pressure a little bit. And he will do so in the rest of chapter 2, as we just read. Along two lines, he kind of goes along with it. First, the Jewish relationship to the law, and second, the value of circumcision. When we look here in these verses, one of the things that we can kind of see as he gets down to it, he's kind of saying, listen to your own preaching. You've heard the phrase, "Do as I say, not as I do." And so what he's kind of saying there is you're saying things, but you're not necessarily doing. You're not practicing what you are preaching and teaching. You are kind of living a hypocritical life. And I think most of us would attest to the fact that being a hypocrite is one of the easiest things that there is. It's easy to slip into that. But he starts off here in verse 17 with this Jewish tendency to boast about their relationship to God and their reliance upon the law. Then he continues in verses 18 to 21 to kind of get on to them for their superior thoughts and attitudes and things related to the law. They're so full of wisdom and such great teachers of the world's lesser beings that they would probably think. But he asked them, "Why are you so ignorant then?" Or to put it in his own words, in the New Living Translation, he's like, "If you teach others, why don't you teach yourselves?" And again, that idea of, maybe you need to listen to your own teaching. Maybe you need to pay attention to those things and do what you're telling others to do. And then he goes on there and he highlights several examples of their problem. And again, I mentioned earlier about hypocrisy, and he's kind of focusing on their hypocrisy in relation to the law, because he's kind of asserting to them that that their message that they were trying to portray wasn't one they were living up to. They said one thing, they did another. And Jesus even pointed this out in Matthew 23 verse 3 when he noted that they say and do not do. So when the Apostle Paul first asks here, you who preach against stealing, do you steal? And the implied answer that he has in there is that they obviously do. Now I need some help looking at some verses. And we're going to look at some times when God dealt with this issue in Scripture. First one is Ezekiel 22 verse 12. We have a total of 5 verses here. Ezekiel 22:12.
I'll grab that one.
Okay, and then Amos
22:12.
Yeah, Ezekiel 22:12, Amos 8 verse 5. Who would look at that one up?
I've got that one.
Okay. Malachi 3 verses 8 and 9. Bruce and Phyllis, did you look that one up?
I'm trying. Malachi what?
Malachi 3 verses 8 and 9.
Okay.
One that we know very, very well. So we'll go through those and then we'll look up a couple more. Todd, Ezekiel 22 verse 12.
In you they take bribes to shed blood. You take usury and increase. You have made profit from your neighbors by extortion and have forgotten me, says the Lord God.
Wow. So what is God saying that they were guilty of there?
Taking advantage of their neighbor by charging them more than what they should.
Yeah. That's pretty serious. It's kind of like, they were cheating each other. And so he's, you who preach against stealing, do you steal? And the answer in that verse was yes. Then Amos 8 verse 5. Karen.
Okay, I have that one. Yeah. Starts out with the word saying, when will the new moon be over that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath be ended that we may market wheat, skimping the measure, boosting the price, and cheating with dishonest scales.
Wow. So in that one, it's almost saying, that Amos, God was saying through Amos, you're sitting there waiting for the sun to go down on Sabbath so that you can raise the price and lower the amount of grain and sell it and cheat people.
Yep.
It's like on Sabbath, we'll be holy, we'll be good. But as soon as it's over, boy, we're gonna cheat people and get more money.
Yep.
All right, Malachi 3 verses 8 and 9 is one that we've heard many times in our lives.
Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation.
Wow. So he's saying the whole nation was stealing, was robbing. And then last 2 verses, Matthew 21 verse 13.
I get it.
And Mark 12 verse 40.
21:13.
Yeah, 21:13 and then Mark 12 verse 40.
I got it.
And he said to them, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves.
Okay, and Mark 12 verse 40.
Who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers, these will receive greater condemnation.
Okay, that verse there was talking about devouring widows' houses. The Greek there, the understanding would be kind of it was like the church leaders would find ways to cheat widows out of their houses, because, the Lord needs the house. The Lord needs the sale of the house. We need that at the temple. and they've been almost manipulated out of their own home for, in quotes, the good of the Lord's work. And so Paul here is saying, you preach against stealing, but look at the history. He's saying to this nation, he's saying to the Jews that have for centuries said they uphold the law, and because they have the law in their midst, they're righteous, they're accepted by God, everything's good. And yet he's saying, you guys, really, you don't even know how bad you are. If you really take a look at yourself, you will see you're not that good. And we're not going to look at the verses, but he's implying the same things about them committing adultery. This idea that they loathed idols, but yet they would go and they would rob pagan temples, and they would keep those idols, as spoils. So he's saying, man, you're boasting the law, but you're breaking the law, and you dishonor God in the way when you do that. And then verse 24, man, that is such a strong condemnation to them, and is also a lesson to us, because he says here, for the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you.
Yeah.
Just as it's written. I think all of us know quotes that we've heard, in the last, last century or in our lives, where people who aren't Christians rightly kind of condemn some things about Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that we're just agreeing with you?
Oh, everybody remembers the quotation from Gandhi, right?
Remind me.
Yeah, basically, when he was alive, he said the whole world would be Christians if not for the Christians.
Hmm.
And even the atheist philosopher Nietzsche said that the greatest witness against Christianity were Christians themselves, because so often in the name of Christ such horrible atrocities have happened. And so I think that this lesson is also for us today, that may it never ever be said of us that because of how we behave and of our bad witness, that anyone would have a reason to reject Christ, or to think worse of our God. And so it's just such a good reminder to us. And so Paul ends this section here on Jewish hypocrisy with an Old Testament paraphrase that's based on passages such as Isaiah 52:5 and Ezekiel 36 verse 22. It is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, as we've just mentioned. And that's kind of goes from those other passages. Ultimate difficulty with hypocrisy is it reflects not only on the hypocrite, but also on the God that they claim to serve. And so that's just a reminder for us. And then Paul jumps into the issue of circumcision. And the Jews, they thought, they thought that circumcision was just so absolute and so vital. Not only that, but they considered, especially for the males, if they were circumcised, it was almost like they couldn't be lost. That was their ticket into paradise. And that, of course, we know that's historical. They believed that all the way from Abraham on down. A Bible scholar named Leon Morris, he points out in one of his books, he says it was unthinkable that a man duly circumcised and admitted to the covenant should fail of his salvation. In the Jewish Mishnah, it said that all Israelites have a share in the world to come. And there was actually a historical rabbi that made this claim. He said, in the hereafter, Abraham will sit at the entrance to Gehenna, or hell, and permit no circumcised Israel to descend there. So it was this idea that if you are circumcised, a male circumcised in the Jewish nation, you couldn't be lost. You were saved, period. And man, what an idea. But Paul, he takes that on head on here, doesn't he? He's like, okay, so your circumcision is of value if you practice the law, but if you don't, your circumcision is turned into uncircumcision. So he's saying it's not just the physical event. It's not just that. Then he goes on there, if an uncircumcised man keeps the requirements of the law, will his uncircumcision not be regarded as circumcision? It kind of reminds me almost of the chapter in Hebrews of the Great Hall of Faith. These things happened and it was accounted to them for righteousness. And so Paul is almost saying here that even if there are people who are physically uncircumcised, if they do what the Lord is calling them to do, it's accounted to them for righteousness. God would look at them as if they were circumcised. He who is physically uncircumcised, if he keeps the law, will he not judge you? And boy, that must have been a strong statement there, stating that there are those who haven't gone through this process, and yet they're going to point out your flaws, your errors, because you are not living up to what this means. You're not living up to what God designed it for and the purpose for it. And then he goes on there, for he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. Do you remember in the book of Acts, was not there a great uproar in the early church about this issue?
Yeah.
Yes.
With so many of the people from the Jewish tradition that are going, no, they've got to get circumcised. You have to. And they prayed about it, and they saw how the Spirit was working in people's lives, and how people were coming to Christ, and they weren't circumcised, and they were having dreams. And it's like, well, I guess maybe God's teaching us something else. And so that was not a requirement that was continued after that time. It wasn't something that was put onto Christians as a mark of salvation. And so, we have to realize too, and when Paul is teaching this, when he's writing this would have continued to cause that uproar in the Jewish believers in Rome. This would have really hit them hard, because this is something that, again, had been passed down to them from Abraham, the father of their faith, all the way down, that this was a requirement for salvation, for righteousness. What are some things today that we could possibly look at, maybe not in quite the same way, but some things we could possibly look at that would be similar, that people could look at as if this is just, gives me a different standing, or is absolutely vital no matter what. One of the things I was looking at is church membership.
I was thinking just even church attendance.
Church attendance.
You're there every single Sabbath. That you're there no matter what, and you could wrap your robes around yourself with that one too.
Ooh.
I think that music and dress right now is not a big issue in our little community here, but as I venture out into bigger churches, I think that there's different worship styles that maybe we're not as familiar with. And so some might say, hey, we don't dress like that, or we don't listen to that. And some may say, well, we do dress like this and we do listen to that. And so we're okay with that, but you're not. So I think that dress and musical preference in our SDA church worship service now could fall into that category.
Okay. So maybe if we were going to, rewrite or adapt verses 25 through 29 for us, for indeed churchy lifestyle is not of value if you practice the law, but if you're a violator of the law, it is of value rather, but if we are a violator of the law, our churchy membership or attendance or lifestyle is turned into basically worthlessness. So if a non-member keeps the requirements of the law, the golden rule, will his non-member, non-attending, non-compliant status not be regarded as part of the body anyway? And he who is physically not present in church and not along all the lifestyle things that we think, if they keep the law, that golden rule, will he not judge us who, though having that letter of the law and are members in good standing, are violators of the law? For he is not a member who is one outwardly, nor is membership that which is outward in the flesh, but he is a member who is one inwardly and belongs, and belonging is of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. And his praise is not from people, but from God. So we can rewrite it and put ourselves into this and say, okay, how does this speak to us today? What do we see from us? And warnings for us. Now, we have to, I always say that, some of these things are for us to be individually convicted of. I don't see this in Jennings Lake. I think we're a very loving church, and I think that we live our faith. But I have been in some churches where it's fake. You can tell it's fake. Everything is perfect and everything in church, and you go to people's homes and you're like, oh my goodness, this is totally different. So yeah, but it's a good thing to remember for us today. So as we remember in Romans 1, Paul made the Jews feel kind of good by leading them to assume superiority over the wicked Gentiles. Throughout Romans 2, he has blasted away at Jewish self-confidence. We see that first he erased their confidence that they were beyond God's final judgment in verses 1 through 16. Then he removed their confidence based on their possession of the law in verses 17 through 24. Third, he undermined their confidence in the value of circumcision as guaranteeing entrance into God's kingdom, verses 25 and 26. And then Paul had the audacity to them to say that Gentiles who obeyed the law would sit in judgment on the Jews in verse 27. That completely reversed everything they had been taught about the judgment. And then in verses 28 and 29, he redefines what it means to be a Jew. Think about that. That must have just been absolutely radical, because he's going, you know what a Jew is? A Jew is one who is led by the Spirit. It's the person who's a Jew inwardly. That's what's most important. A few more verses to look up real quick, because of the phrase, the circumcision of the heart. Would somebody read Deuteronomy 30, verse 6?
I got it.
And then Deuteronomy 10, verse 16.
I got it.
And then Leviticus 26, verse 41.
Leviticus what?
Leviticus 26, verse 41.
Thank you.
All right. Deuteronomy 30, verse 6.
And the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live.
Okay. Deuteronomy 10, verse 16.
Circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer.
All right. Leviticus 26, verse 41.
And that I also have walked contrary to them and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and they accept their guilt.
All right. So we see here that this idea of the circumcision of the heart, that comes very much there from the Old Testament, from those writings of Deuteronomy and Leviticus. So it was not a new concept that Paul was sharing. there. Yeah, he was trying to bring them back or take them back to the old truths that there were of that idea of the circumcision of the heart. I think I've told you this before. When we were in college, there was a young lady there, and for some reason, whoever was arranging things at church, they asked her to have the closing prayer or the opening prayer so many times at church. We never could figure out why. And in her prayer, she would always pray, and Lord, please circumcise our hearts. And I remember all of us would talk afterwards and go, man, why does she keep going on about that? I mean, we understand that, but it just seemed like such a weird thing to continue to have in the prayer every time. But this idea was not as a physical thing, but it was as a thing of saying your heart is where you are showing if you are a true disciple. Your heart is the true sign that you are part of God's chosen people. It wasn't just that outward change through the circumcision process physically, but it's the heart change that God is looking for, and it is the heart change that other people are looking for.
Mhm.
The best sermon that people may ever read or ever see is your life, your heart that has been changed, and then it comes out through loving acts and all the fruits of the Spirit that are poured out or given out through our lives. That is what the world is hungry for right now. And this reminds me kind of Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus in John chapter 3, when Nicodemus comes to him and he's like, you know what, you've got to be born again. You have to have a new heart. And you remember that whole conversation that Nicodemus had with him. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And like, well, do you not understand this? And so he explained to him about the Spirit moving like the wind and everything. But this whole idea of you have to have a complete change of heart. You have to be a different person from the inside out. So I think that the last, maybe the warning in a succinct way for us today is that God would say, we don't want churches full of only water church members, but we want people that are members through the water and the Spirit as well. That's what matters. There are some people I know that, as long as I'm baptized, I'm good. I was baptized. My name's on the book somewhere. I don't even know where it is. I don't know what church it's at, but I am a member of God's remnant church. And God would say today, I think, to those, just like Paul here, you know what? That's not what it's about. That's not good enough. He wants to see a real heart change. He wants to know that and see evidence that he is living in our hearts and changing us from the inside out. Okay, any other thoughts on these verses here as we finish up Romans chapter 2?
Do you think that the people that have that, I've been baptized, so therefore I'm saved, if they truly have been taught that and they believe it, do you think the Holy Spirit would talk to them at some point to help them understand, or are they going to go to their grave still believing what they were taught? Because a lot of that is what they were taught.
Yeah, I think there might be some people who go to their graves believing that. What I find often, though, is that God, he allows circumstances to come into people's lives to get them to really think about their status with him, to really think about, am I truly a follower or not? Often, many times in churches, we'll have people who will show up and say, you know what, I've been a church member for a long time, but I left, and then I've had all these crises and everything like that, and I feel like I need to get back to the Lord, aka I need to come back to church. And so I think that there are circumstances where the Lord does try to work on people's hearts, to show them that that's not enough. But it would not surprise me at all if there are some people who go to their graves believing that as long as they are members of the church, that is the same as salvation. I know that even, online, there's regular conversations with pastors, other pastors, where there's always this struggle when we so connect baptism with church membership. And biblically, they're not necessarily the same thing. Church membership is a record keeping process. It is not a salvation process. And so when we vote somebody into church, we are not voting them into salvation. They're already saved. They're already in the kingdom. They're already have the robe of Christ's righteousness. And the voting them into church membership is just a way to keep record of that. And it's for more clerical things than it is salvation things. But we have it unfortunately, I think, has been conflated too much over the years, where one equals the other, and we really have to fight against that. All right, any other thoughts?
Pastor, this chapter
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of Stephen in the beginning of Acts, when he basically tells the Pharisees this same thing and shocks them. And you think that you're doing and keeping, but you're really not, guys. And of course, they go so crazy, they take him out and stone him. So
Right. Yeah, good reminder. So it's an interesting thought that Paul, who was there and held the coats for the people that stoned Stephen, would then kind of preach the same message.
yes, that's right.
So yeah, good thought there. Good insight.
Is that not a great sermon illustration for people that think, I've lived a life so bad I can never be saved? When you look at Saul, who was there holding the coats at the stoning, persecuting, killing, imprisoning, to have such a 180 and become the champion of God and Jesus in the rest of the New Testament, and telling people that, I mean, that if he can, anybody can change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Paul is a great example of God being able to save to the uttermost. Yeah. He can take the worst of the worst and turn them into the best of the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.